And welcome to another edition of Krown Gridiron Nation on TSN, everyone. There is Gord in Vancouver as usual, but Sean Stevens is sitting at the mothership in Toronto for Mike Hogan, who is on Argo assignment. And I'm Jim, who's always on assignment here on Football Island, ready to bring you the 2-minute offense. Another Illini game, another 100-yard day for London's Chase Brown as Illinois chews up Chattanooga. Chase is now third in carries and first in yards rushing across the nation in NCAA Division I. Tight end Theo Johnson is on the board with a catch for Penn State, but it was a quiet day for the Nittany Lions Canadians in their win over the Chippewas. Ranked Miami got schooled by a directional. Defensive lineman Akeem Messidor was limited to a TFL and a pair of tackles. Middle Tennessee rolls Miami out of the top 25. Nick Mardner had a quiet day, 2 receptions, as Cincinnati had a comfortable win over Indiana. Number 12 NC State had their way with UConn. Quebecer Kevin Clarcius had a quiet day, 2 receptions for a dozen yards for the Huskies. A-State Old Dominion and linebacker Malik Straker continues to light it up for the Red Wolves. Another multiple TFL day for the Carleton transfer, but Old Dominion holds on by a field goal at home. Montrealer Damian Alford with a pair of receptions for the Orange. Syracuse is assembling a good season. This week's victim, Virginia, by 2. Wesley Bailey with a solid stat line. D lineman Rene Conga with a sack as well. The Rutgers defense held Iowa to 27, but the Scarlet Knights offense couldn't keep up. Montreal freshman receiver Joey Corcoran has been on fire through 3 games at New Hampshire. 6 receptions, 71 yards, and a tutty in a win over Towson. Montana State goes to the red turf of Eastern Washington and gets the win. But for the hometown Eagles, it was Kelowna sophomore Nolan Ulm with 2 catches, one of them for a major. And Ohio outlasted Fordham with 111 points combined between these two, and a game where Kurtis Rourke registered a 198 quarterback rating for the Bobcats. Even with all that productivity, it came down to Rourke connecting with Jacoby Jones with 52 seconds left for the win. So, Kurtis Rourke is for real. Is that a question or a statement, Gord?
I'm going to cautiously say that it's a statement, but I will put a little bit of an asterisk on it. It's been a tale of 2 seasons so far through 4 games for the Ohio Bobcats, and by extension, it's also been a tale of 2 seasons for Kurtis Rourke. They've had 2 wins against low-level opponents, which they have won, I wouldn't say handily, but the offense has rolled in, and they have lost 2 games on the road against top 25 teams in which they have really struggled to get the ball moving. And so for Rourke, in their 2 wins, he has a quarterback rating of 203 and a quarterback rating of 198. In their 2 losses, he has quarterback ratings of 80 and 108. So that's a pretty big gap between those performances. But you also have to factor in that those road games at Penn State, at Iowa State, he's playing with a team that has a pretty severe talent deficiency in those games to try and get the ball rolling with. And in games where it's been a little bit more of an even playing field talent-wise, he has piled up the numbers. If you look at the schedule going ahead for Ohio too, there aren't any more Penn States on the schedule. So I do think that his numbers will continue to improve and he will continue to trend in the right direction. And maybe those questions start to go away pretty quickly.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to have to agree with Gord on this one, but I'm going to word it a little bit differently. I think it's a question that has the potential to evolve into a statement. If you look at the first 4 games, and by the way, it's just 4 games, like Gord said, they faced 2 top 25 teams, which they've suffered losses, and they've also faced 1 FCS team and 1 lower tier FBS team. Through those 4 games, Kurtis Rourke has had almost 1,200 passing yards and 9 touchdowns, which is phenomenal. But I think what's really going to determine if he is one of those top-tier quarterbacks in his conference is really the conference schedule itself. So I think over the next number of weeks, specifically the next 6 to 7 weeks, we're going to get a better look at how he plays within his conference instead of playing against lower-tier teams, lower-tier opponents, or higher-tier teams, higher-tier opponents. And then we'll get a pretty good outlook on whether or not that could be a statement or a question itself. But I think right now it's too early to tell if Nathan Rourke is for real. So I'm going to leave it as a question that can evolve into a statement, but let's leave that asterisk there for now.
Well, we know that Kurtis Rourke would be leading the pack, but who would join him in our weekly Stateside 5? Quite a stats line for London senior defensive back Sidney Brown. A sack, a TFL, a pass breakup, and 3 tackles. Another week, another 5 for surprise freshman Joey Corcoran from Montreal in 2022. 18 receptions, 186 yards, and 2 touchdowns through 3 games. At number 3, Brampton linebacker Malik Straker is playing bigger than his measurables at linebacker at A-State. 2.5 TFL, a pass breakup, and 9 tackles. When Chase Brown plays, we know 3 things this year. 1, he gets at least 20 or more touches. 2, he gets at least a 100-yard rushing day. And 3, he's in the Stateside 5. And at number 1, it's Oakville, Ontario's Kurtis Rourke. Video game numbers versus Fordham, including a school record 537 yards passing, 4 TDs, and he added another major with his feet. There you see our Stateside 5 standings through 4 weeks. Chase Brown on top, Kurtis Rourke moving up in the pack. But Deshaun, I've got to ask you, who is your riser outside of Kurtis Rourke that you think Canada should focus on?
Listen, over the last couple of weeks, I know y'all been talking about Malik Straker, but I need to take my turn to talk about him. First off, he was a part of that 2020 class of USPORTS athletes that made the jump to the NCAA, and he's been holding his own. Over the last 2 games for A-State, he's led the team in tackles. He had 12 tackles 2 weeks ago, and he had 9 tackles this past week. Listen, he's an undersized linebacker, but he can do everything. So I'm looking at him. He's a Brampton product. He spent his first 2 seasons at Carleton University. So I'm looking at Malik Straker, and I'm saying this man is jumping. He's jumping on the boards, and he's a linebacker to look out for this season. So I got to take my word on him. I like what I see from Malik Straker.
And then I would say on the flip side of things, if there's one person that may be losing a little bit of momentum right now, and it's not necessarily a lot of his own fault, but it's Akeem Messidor, and it has more to do with the team situation in Miami. He's part of a defense that gave up over 500 yards of offense and 45 points in just 59 plays in their loss to Middle Tennessee State this past weekend. A stunning upset for Miami, and the Hurricanes program all of a sudden looks to be a little bit astray in Mario Cristobal's first year. Tyler Van Dyke, for example, hyped in the preseason as a potential first-round pick this year, got benched in this game. A black eye on the surface, losing to Middle Tennessee State. And I know Jim likes to joke that that's the directionless university, but it's the Hurricanes who look directionless after this one, and Messidor might be paying the price a little bit.
Coming up, we've got blowouts, we've got fantastic finishes north of the border. Welcome back, everyone. Folks, you know life is all about balance, don't you? And we are going to try to balance blowout games with fantastic finishes in our 3-minute warning. Let's go first to Ontario. Laurier and Ottawa tied at 11 with 2 minutes remaining. Ben Miracle finds Emma Claire Polk, and 41 yards later, the GGs take an 18-11 lead. But this is Canadian football, and 2 minutes on the clock is an eternity. Laurier responds by manufacturing an 8-play, 77-yard drive in 1:26 that concludes with a Quentin Scott TD. We are tied back at 18. But 4 plays later, with no time remaining, Campbell Flair lines up for a 55-yard field goal, and it is good. The GGs with the win. This could be the best game of 2022. Queens showed no mercy in their visit to Guelph. At the front of the wedge was Anthony Souls, 244 yards rushing, an average of 12 per carry, and 4 touchdowns. Guelph's only TD came with 20 seconds left. Argo Cup, York and Toronto. Lucas Stoikos was the offensive star of the day for the Blues with 121 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. Varsity Blues win the GTA. Western and Waterloo going by the 2022 script. Mustangs up 23-0 after 1, 43-0 at the half, 62-0 after 3. 100-yard rushing days for 3 Purple Ponies, Edwards, Winati, and Thompson. to the C-Dub, and a 21-point run by the Saskatchewan Huskies over 15 minutes in the first half sealed the deal for Saskatchewan. Mason Nios continues his quarterbacking rampage, 25 of 44 for 351 and 2 TDs, and running back Riker Frank averaged 10.7 yards per carry in a 128-yard night, and he added a tutty. Regina UBC. Let's see how the other team from the rectangular province fared in Vancouver. If UBC were given points for moving the ball between the 30s, that's where they'd win. But they don't. A great night for Ram linebacker Ryder Varga. 11 and a half tackles and 3 TFL. Did the pandemic kill off the Calgary Dinos as a playoff team? Manitoba crushed them in every way imaginable. The Herd with 5 touchdowns to Calgary 0. Yards 545 to 104. First downs 38 to 11. That was painful to watch for the 403. Those blowouts kept rolling into Sunday. Laval crushed Concordia in front of 13,500 in Quebec City. Arnaud Desjardins, what a day at pivot, 364 and 5 TD passes. Kevin Mattel hauled in 10 of those for 187 and 3 TD. St. FX rolled Mount Allison 26-7. It's the first loss for the Mounties while the X-Men remain perfect. Bishops and St. Mary's were postponed due to Hurricane Fiona. So Saskatchewan goes into Alberta and comes out with a solid win. Regina does tons on defense to keep UBC out of that game, and they escape the coast with a win. Those teams are 1 and 2 now. Is the Canada West over, Gord?
Well, I would say that those teams are clearly 1 and 2. I don't know that there's a 3 at this point in time. There's a pretty big gap, I think, from what we've seen so far between those two and the rest of the conference. Though I will say that Manitoba is gaining momentum a little bit right now and maybe playing their way out of that slow start in the first 2 weeks. But Regina has a tough road victory here in BC in front of a homecoming crowd. They take down the Thunderbirds. They're the only team that has even played the Saskatchewan Huskies even remotely tight this season, as the Huskies blew out Alberta this past weekend. They've blown out Calgary. They've beat UBC pretty comfortably as well. So the only remaining test for Saskatchewan is Manitoba, and Manitoba trending in the right direction right now. Maybe they can give them a go, but if I'm going purely on what I've seen on the field so far, it is very clearly right now the Saskatchewan schools and then everybody else in the Canada West.
Yeah, listen, I gotta agree with you. I think the Canada West Conference is over. Okay, this is clearly a 2-horse race between Saskatchewan and Regina. I'm looking at the Saskatchewan Huskies, and I'm looking at quarterback Mason Nice, who is the clear-cut front runner right now for the Heck Crichton Award. He has 1,400 passing yards. He's averaging 350 passing yards per game, and he has 9 touchdowns. The Huskies have the most productive offense in the nation, and they're scoring just a little bit over 30 points per game. And their defense has only given up 35 points all season. So for me, they're the clear-cut front runner to win the Canada West Conference. But I'm looking at Regina as that close number 2. There's not a lot that we can tell from that team over the couple of wins that they've had, but I'm really looking at that game that they had against Saskatchewan, where they limited that high power offense to only 11 points, majority of them coming off field goals. So I'm looking at Regina. I love their defense. Their defense right now is only allowing a little over 70 rushing yards per game. I'm saying Regina is that clear-cut number 2. I'm looking at Saskatchewan. I'm looking at Regina. Those are my top 2 teams for the Canada West Conference.
Over 7,000 for homecoming at Guelph, and the Queens Gales embarrass the home side. We'll get to Guelph in a minute and the state of that operation, but let's talk about the positives. Queens, Steve Snyder, what that coach has done to rebuild that program. Tell us about it, Deshaun.
Listen, I'm looking at Queens and I'm saying last year they were the most controversial undefeated team in possibly U Sports football history. The OUA East and the quote-unquote weakness of the conference made a lot of people question the legitimacy of Queens' 6-0 record. But I'm looking at this team this season, I'm saying this team could possibly be better than they were last year. Their defense has always been good. They had a great defense last year led by Anthony Federico, and they have a great defense this year led by Ashton Merlin-Melanson. But I'm looking at their offense. Last year, their offense had one of the top rushing attacks in the nation behind Rasheed Tucker. This year, they're coming back with an even stronger rushing attack with depth and 3 running backs who can all give you over 100 yards on any given day. And I'm looking at James Keenan. He's become a much better quarterback and has actually elevated himself into OUA All-Star conversation. So I'm looking at the Queens Gales this year, and I'm saying, hey, this could potentially be a better team than they were last year, and they're only getting better every week. And if they keep getting better and putting up 60 points just like they did this past weekend, this could be a team that can give the Western Mustangs a run for their money if they meet in the 8th Cup.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up James Keenan because he actually threw a couple early picks and got yanked in this game this past weekend. But I also would say that that's a bit of a testament to what's been most impressive about what Steve Snyder is building at Queens right now, I think, is that this success, this momentum behind it is not necessarily built on the back of a couple of superlative players. You know, I think of my era at Queens when we reached a high level of success ultimately in a national championship. And a lot of that was built on, it was a strong roster, but built on the backs of guys like Mike Giffen and Danny Brannigan that were superlative players. This Queens squad doesn't really have that. And so that is a testament to, I think, a really strong foundation for them. And man, on the flip side of the field here, what is going on in Guelph? This is a team that felt like it was having some positive momentum, some things going in the right direction. You know, Ryan Shane's starting to find his footing after his first year as a head coach. You know, now he knows what things are like, and Dad comes back from out west to come join forces with him and add another experienced voice to the room, and everything kind of seems to be trending upwards for Guelph, and it has completely, the bottom has completely fallen out on them. And this was another brutal effort for them. It just completely run out of the water. And I'm sure things are not very happy in Guelph. And I got to say, with the way the Calgary offense has looked, the offense that both those Shanes left behind, I think they put up just 104 net yards this week on offense in Calgary. So this looks like one of those classic divorce cases where nobody really wins in the end. So we'll see where things are going for both of those programs, but it's not looking great right now.
Coming up, big guys with big ideas. Welcome back. Here are your CJFL standings on the road to the Canadian Bowl. Well, you hardcores out there enjoyed it so much, we thought we'd bring it back for another year and for another football weekend in Canada. Yes, it's the Rouge Zone. You can track up to 4, count them 4, USPORTS games on the same screen with commentary from yours truly. We'll bring a few friends along as well. It starts Saturday at 10 in the morning Pacific time, 1 o'clock Eastern, and we'll roll for about 5 hours, maybe even more if the games are really good. And you know what's really good? Talking about some big ideas to move the sport of football along. Welcome back, everyone, by the way. So, Gord, give me one big idea. It doesn't have to be confined to university ball. Could be high school, could be flag. One big idea to move this sport forward in this country.
You know, it's funny, when people call me a big idea guy, they're usually commenting on my size, not my ideas. But I would say my one big idea, one of my biggest frustrations as a high school football coach in this country is how I have to do everything that I do to support that program for free. And I'm not trying to be a martyr here or a crusader or anything like that, but you know, people need to understand that coaching high school football is a highly time-intensive activity. It is not just going out there and coaching a practice. It's coaching multiple hours of practice every day. It's planning every single minute of those practices. It's dealing with off-field stuff and organizational, administrative tasks. That adds up to hundreds, if not thousands of hours a year that people like me put in. And we have a system in which our teachers' unions, our collective bargaining agreements, our societal structure tells us that the expectation is for that to be volunteer. And that really turns people off after a while. It is a pretty common practice out here, for example, for coaches to kind of need to take a mid-career step back from high school head coaching. Our friend at TSN, Farhan Lalji, a great example of that. A guy who is still in the prime of his life, and he is stepped away from coaching a couple years ago because it was just too much with very little return in terms of material compensation for what he's doing. Asking people to do what we need to do as a labor of love is a very, very big ask, and I think that it's something that really holds back the game in this country, because even if you can find somebody like myself who's willing to do it, I have a very, very difficult time filling out a staff because they all have to volunteer a ton of their time as well, and I think that's something that really needs to be looked at.
Listen, I'm a huge fan of U Sports football, and as someone who is just 2 years removed from actually playing the game, one of the things I want to see happen in U Sports football is a new playoff format. On paper, the U Sports football playoff format is actually beautiful if you take it in. It's beautiful, right? But the only issue is there's a discrepancy once you reach that national semifinal. And so what I think I'd like to see happen is I'd love to see U Sports make use of that top 10. The top 10 rankings are a beautiful thing. Every week they come out on Tuesday at 1 p.m., 1:30 p.m. Sometimes they're a little bit late, right? But they cause so much conversation and so much interest in the product itself. I'd love to see U Sports take the top 10 format and potentially use that as a new playoff system. Really and truly what it does is it gives us the opportunity to see playoff matchups that we've never seen before, right? You could think about this. In the first round, you could potentially be seeing a Western versus a Montreal, or a Saskatchewan versus a McMaster, or who knows, even in the Vanier Cup with a top 10 playoff format system, you could even be seeing two conferences, two teams from the same conference play in the Vanier Cup. Can you imagine seeing Western versus Queens in the Vanier Cup, or seeing Laval versus Montreal in the Vanier Cup? So I'd love to see U Sports take that top 10 format and use it to make a new playoff system.
Coming up, we've got lines, we've got games. U Sport Games of the Week, we'll actually call it just Game of the Week, because when the Panda Game's on, it is the focus of everyone across the country, Deshaun.
Yeah, listen, we're looking at the Panda Game, right? One of the most anticipated games on the U Sports calendar every year. And this year, the Panda Game is super important. You got the number 8 ranked Ottawa GGs facing off against the 3-2 Carleton Ravens. Both these teams are sitting in the middle of the pack in the OUA standings. Both these teams have solid rushing attacks and are getting it done on the defensive side of the ball. Listen, this is going to be a pivotal game for the OUA standings, and this could end up being an actual tiebreaker in seedings come playoff time in late October. So I'm looking at the Panda Game, I'm looking at Ottawa, I'm looking at Carleton. And this should be definitely a big-time must-watch game of the week.
Yeah, I think you make a great point that the Panda Game's always a fantastic event, but when the teams are good, it has that added level of importance and intensity to it, and so it should be, everyone should be in for a really good one in Ottawa this week. And for me, every year when the Panda Game comes up, I look around the rest of the country, and I just wish that we could see more kind of derby games like this, to borrow a European soccer term, where the event is as big, if not maybe even bigger than the football game itself. You know, Panda has always been that. They've carved out a great example of that. But I would love to see, especially some of the crosstown rivalry situations, you know, Concordia and McGill, out here, out west, you know, the Strum Bowl is being revived this year. I would love to see that built up to be something like that again. I think there is a great marketing opportunity for U Sports if they can make some of these rivalry games into even bigger events that reach beyond the bounds of campus boundaries, because Panda is one of the few that does that. And when you look at it, it really is Canadian football at its absolute finest.
For everyone on our Krown Gridiron Nation team, Gord, Deshaun, Mike, who will be back next week, and PointsBet and Krown Produce, this is Jim Mullen saying, what are you doing? Let's get out to the game.